Jack Habert lived upstairs in 2B. It was a room 16 by 16, large enough for his needs. The beige carpet was 12 by 16, running the entire length of the room, but ending 4 feet from the small kitchen. There, the master had put down a rather pretty linoleum. The linoleum extended all the way to the small bathroom. In the small bathroom, Jack had put down a simple bath mat that took up almost all of the available floor space. But it was enough for him. He didn't need that much. He didn't want that much. Jack Hebert certainly didn't need the 3,200 square foot house his wife had insisted on buying. He'd objected at first. It was just him, her, and their 16-year-old daughter in the house, and they just didn't need that much space. Especially since Deirdre would undoubtedly have to move out in 2 years. Ever since she'd seen the picture of the college campus, all the girl had talked about was going to Florida State. But Jack, as usual, relented and put down a 25% down payment, $52,500. Then, 2 years after Deirdre moved out, Jacqueline bombarded him with the usual, "We're estranged. It's not you, it's me, and this will help us reconnect." He was perplexed as to how a 47-year-old woman taking a 32-year-old lover was supposed to help them reunite. But to Jacqueline's surprise, this time Jack didn't capitulate. He didn't just give in. "You'll be left with nothing," she shouted, and her normally beautiful face contorted into an ugly grimace when he informed her he was moving out. "Fine, at least I won't be staying with a wrinkled old whore," he said, and finished packing his suitcase. Miller's Electronics had sold him the equipment. Hiding them in the big house wasn't difficult. Jacqueline was not overly squeamish about housekeeping and not overly observant of her surroundings. He learned that Jacqueline's lover was a teacher at Baylor Lake High School. That's how they met. Brian taught English, and Jacqueline was the librarian. Jacqueline and Brian decided that Jack should just go along with the plan. They would have an affair, then Brian would go home to his wife, and Jacqueline would go home to her husband. But Jack Hebert didn't become chief accountant of St. Elizabeth's Public Utilities because of carelessness. He became chief accountant because of neatness and thoroughness. As they had arranged, Brian and Jacqueline went to Sweet Peas for a dinner of fried catfish. Brian's parents were there, sitting at a table. An embarrassed Brian introduced Jacqueline as a co-worker. "So where's Michelle?" asked Brian's mother demandingly. She's at home with the girls," Brian replied, stammering. "Yeah, she told us," his father snapped back. "Said you had some kind of parent-teacher conference at school today or something." Yeah, but there was a little recess and we decided to get something to eat," Brian stammered. "Uh-huh," both of Brian's parents said, letting him know that they weren't buying his lame excuse. After a silent dinner, the no longer quite amorous couple went to Foxtrot's lounge for some dancing. Jacqueline loved to dance, but Jack didn't like it very much. He had 2 left feet. And at the Foxtrot, Jacqueline's mother and stepfather were dancing. "Yes, dear. Your husband slipped Roger a couple $100 and told him to take me here for some dancing and drinking," her mother giggled. She then looked at Brian and raised an eyebrow. "But what are you doing here?" she asked her daughter. Well, you know Jack doesn't really like to dance, so," Jacqueline stammered. "Come on, Monique, they're playing our song," Roger insisted. "It's not our song, you silly old goat," Monique laughed, but allowed herself to be dragged back to the dance floor. But Jacqueline was determined to continue her affair, if only to show her husband that he wasn't going to ruin her evening. Brian was fine with that. Dancing and dinner were just a means to an end for him. "Damn, nice house," Brian whistled as he pulled up to the house in South Shore Baylor Lake. "Thanks," Jacqueline purred. They entered the house. "Hi, Brian," Michelle said from the living room couch. What? What are you doing here?" almost shouted Brian. "Oh, I thought I'd show your wife and your daughters where you're going to live," said Jack Hebert as he entered the room carrying a box of things. "Hi, Jacqueline. I just came by to get a few more of my things." "I already told you, yes," Michelle said in a suppressed whisper. "After Stacy, I told you that was it." The pregnant woman rose from the too-soft couch, walked over to Brian, and gave him a ringing slap. Looks like you all have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to go, Jack smiled. The girls really like the pool. You son of a bitch, Jacqueline snapped at a smiling Jack. By the way, you all owe Danny $12 for babysitting Millie and Mandy today, Jack said, pointing to a neighbor girl who was splashing in the pool with the two girls. Then he walked out of the house. They had almost $84,000 of equity. Jacqueline screamed and cried and begged Jack to forgive her. She didn't want to lose the house or the $17,000 worth of furniture she had accumulated. Her brand new Mercedes-Benz still had 3 more years left on the account. Jacqueline begged, pleaded, and cried for Jack to forgive her. She knew she couldn't afford a car on her salary, and she nearly fainted when Parker Johnson, her attorney, broke the news to her. Jacqueline would be responsible for half of Deirdre's tuition and living expenses while the child attended college. Besides, she was having a hard enough time making ends meet on a public school librarian's salary. Oh no, honey, Monique laughed strainedly when Jacqueline approached her mother with the idea of moving in with them. But that's only as far as I can go, whined Jacqueline. Honey, it's a 2-bedroom apartment, said Roger. I'm so thankful your father isn't alive to see it, said Monique. She raised an eyebrow and looked at her daughter. Do you remember? Asked Monique. You brought home the boy Jack Heber, and your father told you that the boy was a snake in the grass. How shocked he was when he saw how wrong he was. Their oldest, John Jr., called his father. Dad, Mom is asking us if she can stay here, JJ said. Son, you have a room, then by all means, let her stay, Jack said. Well, I just don't want to. I don't want any trouble, JJ admitted. Son, that woman changed your diapers, cleaned up after you, fed you all these years. If you have the room, give it to her, Jack said. Love you, Daddy, JJ said. Michelle Melançon proved true to her word. She hadn't forgiven Brian for his attempted affair. Brian realized that it was impossible to live on half his salary and moved back in with his parents. But at least these living arrangements allowed Brian's parents to spend a lot of time with Amelia and Amanda, their 2 granddaughters. And when Michelle gave birth to Barry Melançon, named after her father, they began to see him often as well. Barry? I thought we were going to name him after me, Brian whined. We were going to, Michelle snapped back. But you've made it so that there's no we no more. Jack had planned for the apartment to be temporary, but found that he liked not having to spend hours cutting the grass, raking leaves, mulching the garden, planting flowers, or vacuuming the pool. He found that he liked not having to change the wallpaper, paint the spare bedroom, or rip out the old carpet. Jack discovered that he liked not cleaning out the garage, attic, or tool shed. There was a closet in his apartment. He found that it fit 12 suits, 12 dress shirts, and 24 ties perfectly. It also fit 3 pairs of shoes, a long coat, and a short jacket perfectly. A small set of drawers fit 4 pairs of jeans, 12 pairs of underwear, 12 pairs of socks, and 4 shirts. The furniture was minimalist, too. Jack had his favorite chair, 2 bookshelves, a small table and 2 dining chairs, and a full-size bed. He didn't even have a television. He briefly considered using the TV in Deirdre's room, but couldn't think of any TV programs he wanted to watch. Jack Hebert was an avid Saints fan, but Red Sports Bar had a 61-inch LCD TV, cold beer, insanely spicy chicken wings, cold beer, jalapeno nachos, and cold beer. If he needed to watch a certain TV program, he could watch it on his computer. He discovered that he enjoyed cooking. Jacqueline always yelled that he made a mess when he tried to cook. But here the options were to either cook endless frozen dinners in the microwave or learn to cook. And he learned to cook. Jack was driving home one evening. A work colleague had given him a new recipe for baked chicken, and he was just about to have leg quarters left when he happened to glance up at a colorful building. Jack drove down the same road day after day after day, passing this building. Why he had chosen to look in here at this particular moment, he couldn't understand. The curtains were open, and he was staring at the glass window of Kizzy's dance school. Inside stood 7 couples, twirling and sliding. A car horn honk brought him out of his trance. Jack turned and pulled into the parking lot outside the building. He then sat in the car and watched. He watched as an attractive young woman with a beatific smile on her beautiful face showed them a few basic moves and then waved for them to start again. Even though he couldn't hear the music, the smooth movements of the dancing people filled Jack's head with music. Then the class was apparently over. Some couples stood and chatted, while others walked out into the twilight and got into their cars. Jack made his decision and got out of the car. "Hi, can I help you?" smiled the young dance instructor, pulling away from the older couple. "Yes, you are. I mean, I'm not a couple, but you teach individual dances?" "God, it was so beautiful watching them dance," Jack stammered, perplexed as to why he was here. Kizzy smiled wider and took his nervous hands in her warm palms. "God, this is your lucky day," she insisted. "Okay," Jack said, not feeling very lucky. "Come on, let's go see what we can do," Kizzy said, pulling him toward the counter. He agreed to sign up for her 12-week program and arranged to be there Wednesday night. "At 6 o'clock, I'll introduce you to your dance partner," Kizzy said as she handed him a receipt for payment. "Oh boy, this is my lucky day," Jack smiled. Even as he prepared dinner, Jack couldn't resist humming the music he heard in his head as the couples danced before his eyes. Jack had met Jacqueline Adams at Cabrini High School. She and her family had just moved from Stepping Stone, Louisiana, so her father could start working at the Baggett mattress factory. She was pretty enough, but she didn't stand out as anything among the other beauties at Cabrini High. Jack Hebert certainly didn't stand out among the elite of Cabrini High. He wasn't particularly handsome, he wasn't particularly rich, he wasn't particularly athletic. He didn't have a nice car, he didn't possess a poetic soul, and he couldn't dance. But he was smart. After weeks of being ignored in the upper echelon of Cabrini High, Jacqueline Adams was thrilled when Jack Hebert quietly asked her if she wanted to go to Jade Garden to eat Chinese food. And after her father had declared Jack Hebert no other than a snake in the grass, a dog in heat, Jack had risen several notches higher in Jacqueline's eyes. The fall ball was being held at Cabrini, and Jacqueline had been waiting for Jack to invite her to it. As the day drew near, she finally asked when he planned to invite her. "I can't dance," he confessed to the girl. So she went with Joe Manzella. Suddenly, Jacqueline and Joe were a couple. Jack was a little disappointed, a little hurt. But at the same time, he was practical. They were 18 years old. They could date whoever they wanted. In just a few months, he would be enrolled at the University of Southwest Louisiana in Lafayette, Louisiana, and Jacqueline would go wherever she wanted to go, and they would probably never see each other again. But Joe Manzella's smirk was pissing Jack off. "Hey, Hebert, how's it going?" teased Joe. "Oh, things are going well, Manzella. How's Gina doing?" asked Jack, referring to Joe's older sister, who had a reputation for being a whore. Joe was muscular, but Jack was smart. Joe took a swing at Jack and Jack dodged, allowing Joe to punch him into the cinderblock wall instead. "Ooh, that hurt," Jack chuckled as Joe looked at his swollen arm in horror. Jacqueline had tried dating several other guys in an attempt to make Jack jealous, but then had been forced to admit defeat and go back to him. She didn't go to either the winter ball or the spring ball. Jack Hebert couldn't dance. 29 years later, in apartment 2B, Jack was looking forward to learning to dance. Chapter 2. It was Wednesday, and Jack wore his burgundy shoes with a medium brown suit, light blue shirt, and burgundy tie. The burgundy shoes were his most comfortable pair. "I could have sworn it was Wednesday," Jill, one of the HR administrative assistants, remarked as Jack walked past her cubicle. It's Wednesday," Jack said. "No, Wednesday is a dark blue color day," the young woman smiled. "With a blue-gray tie or a blue tie with yellow dots." "Not anymore," Jack smiled. "We changed it a little." "Is that a new suit?" asked Rhonda, the other accountant. "No, it's his Friday suit," said Bill, one of the IT people. "Oh," said Rhonda, staring perplexedly at Jack for a moment, and then started studying her computer screen again. "No, Bill, see? It's hung up on something. It won't let me go to the next page." If putting on a different suit had caused a little commotion in the office, Jack's leaving 20 minutes early had almost caused a panic. He drove to Tommy's Po' Boys, a small restaurant next door to the dance school, and almost ordered his usual option, ham and cheese with olive dressing. No, you know what? Give me a big shrimp, hot sauce, yes, hot sauce on the table, yes, give me a shrimp and Coke, Jack ordered. He happily ate his sandwich, checked his watch once more, and went into the next room. He nervously sucked on a mint and stood apart from the other customers. They were all couples. Great, you're here, Kizzy cheered as she spotted Jack. Meet Michelle Melanson, your partner. The last time Jack had seen her, she was 7, almost 8 months pregnant. All he remembered about her was that she was a pretty and plump young woman who had 2 very cute little girls, and that her pretty face was now and then blotchy from crying, then red with anger. Michelle Melanson was 4 feet 11 inches tall and probably weighed 170 pounds. Her small face was round, her mouth was a button, her nose was a round nub, and her big brown eyes were round. All of Michelle Melanson looked round. Hi, Bubbles, Jack said, not even thinking to greet her. And she burst out laughing. And why do you call me that? She laughed. I don't know, he admitted, blushing slightly since they were now the center of attention of the other couples. First thing that came to mind. He'd learned that her parents had paid for 12 weeks of dance lessons for her. It was a way to get her out of the house for a couple hours. But when Michelle showed up for her first lesson, Kizzy had to admit that they didn't have any male partners for her. Michelle was fine with that. She sat and watched the class, admiring their moves. And then Kizzy texted me and told me to come here this Wednesday, Michelle mumbled. By the end of the first class, Jack was covered in sweat. Halfway through, he had to take off his jacket. Then Michelle reached her small hand up and loosened his tie and undid the first button on his shirt. She didn't think about it. She just reached up and did it. There, isn't that better? She asked as they made another box. Relax, Jack. Let the music move you, Kizzy encouraged. When the lesson was over, Michelle took his hand. Will you be here next week? Please say you will. I had so much fun, she muttered. You had fun? Dancing with an old man? He smiled, lifting his suit jacket. You're not an old man, she said. Twice your age, he objected. Yes, but still, she said. I'll be here, he smiled. Dancing with her, he tried to look into her big brown eyes. She gave him a warm smile and he blushed. But as she walked out of the building, he watched her from behind. As if sensing his gaze, Michelle turned in the doorway and smiled broadly at him. Did you have fun? Asked Kizzy. You know what? I did have fun. I mean, I know I'm terrible at it, but I did have fun, Jack admitted. Number 1, you're not terrible at it, you're just getting started, said the other woman. And number 2, dancing is fun, said her partner. Take care of the latter, and the former will take care of itself. I couldn't have said it better myself, Kizzy agreed. The next morning, Jack reached into the closet for his Thursday suit, but then decided he would wear Wednesday's suit instead. Now I'm totally lost, Jill teased him as he strolled down the hall. He only smiled. His cell phone buzzed and he saw it was JJ, so he answered it. Dad, do you have— Listen, us, Shauna? JJ stuttered into the receiver. Is your mother driving you crazy? Guessed Jack. Yeah, did you hear the school let her go? Asked JJ. No, they didn't let her go, sighed Jack. Yeah, and that guy Brian did too, said JJ. Wow, said Jack. Why? Did she say why she was let go? No, I mean, believe me, I asked. But she just said she didn't want to talk about it, JJ said. Jack recognized the statement. Jacqueline said that whenever she backed herself into a corner, she just said she didn't want to talk about it, and repeated the phrase until the matter was finally closed. And with Shauna, I mean, the baby's coming in a couple months and— JJ continued. Okay, I'll talk to her, Jack sighed. They met at Jade Gardens. Jack couldn't keep from smiling sadly. Obviously, Jacqueline thought it was a date. She had applied a rather thick makeup, squeezed her body into her dress, A year earlier, Jack would have been thrilled to see her in such a dress. Today, however, the outfit looked dull and shabby on an older woman who wouldn't age. "Don't you look lovely?" he said, and took a seat across from her. "Thank you, and you look—" "Is that a new suit?" Jacqueline said. "Yeah, I wore the wrong suit the other day and almost everyone had a heart attack," Jack grinned. "I realized I'd become pretty predictable, so I gave all my old suits to Goodwill and bought all new ones." "Well, it must be nice," Jacqueline muttered bitterly. "Yes, nice," Jack agreed amicably. The waitress came over and asked if they were ready to order yet. "You know what, Jacqueline? I know exactly what you're going to order. You order the same thing every time," Jack said. "But I'll bet you $1,000 you can't tell her what I want." She looked at him for a long time, trying to remember what he usually ordered. "Are you ready to order?" the waitress demanded again. "She'll order spring rolls and sweet and sour pork, right?" said Jack. "That's right," replied Jacqueline. "And I want a glass of iced tea, sweet and sour, kung pao chicken, and fried rice." Jack completed the order. "So how are you?" asked Jacqueline. "Fine," replied Jack. "Work's going well. Got myself a little bachelor pad. Just told you about my new suits. They've gone up a little since we last bought new suits. And Rhonda just announced she's pregnant, so I'll be looking for a temp to replace her. How about you?" The waitress poured him a sweet iced tea, and Jack nodded politely. He listened to Jacqueline whine about losing her job, how hard it was to live with JJ and his wife. Shauna didn't seem to like her very much. Deirdre was still resentful of her, but Penelope and Percy were at least nice to her. "But neither of them say they have a room," she finished her tale of woe. "So get your own place. You're a grown woman," Jack said, as the waitress served them their food. "With what? My looks?" snapped Jacqueline. "I just told you I lost my job." "Well, if you can't use your looks, then try using your charming personality," Jack suggested. "Screw you, Jack!" Jacqueline snorted. "Just eat," Jack said. "Every time I get this dish, I swear it's hotter than the last time I ordered it." While Jack ordered chocolate ice cream for her and Neapolitan for himself, Jacqueline started talking about reconciliation. "Not just no, but hell no," he smiled. "But why not?" she almost shouted. "So I can sit around and wait for you to tell me the next time you tell me we've drifted apart, and it's not about me, it's about you? You just need some fun. It doesn't mean anything, it's just fun. Will it make us stronger as a couple?" asked Jack and sent some ice cream into his mouth. Jacqueline seriously considered throwing the ice cream at him, his new fancy suit. The waitress returned and placed the bill on the table. Jack quickly checked the slip of paper and placed the credit card on the small tray. The sullen woman immediately withdrew. "Maybe it's the hormones," Jacqueline suggested. "I'm getting older after all. My periods are getting less frequent." "And instead of going to Dr. Pellier and talking to him about it, you decided to have fun with another man," Jack said, and signed the bill, adding a 15% tip. "But he was so understanding, because you were never that busy. And Brian," whined Jacqueline. "I was always so busy with all the nonsense you decided to do right then and there," said Jack and rose to his feet. "I was always too busy driving our daughter around." He shook his head sadly. "You know what I haven't heard? I mean, I've heard all this crap. It's my fault. It's the hormones." "Brian listened to you," Jack said. "But not once have I heard Jacqueline say she was sorry. Not once have I heard Jacqueline say it's her fault." "But I am sorry," Jacqueline said quickly. "JJ and Shauna need that bedroom for their baby," Jack said. "So you need to find yourself a small apartment. And there's a program at the St. Elizabeth Courthouse that will help you find a job. Take advantage of it." Jacqueline burned another bridge behind her. When she returned to the small bungalow where JJ and Shauna lived, she yelled at Shauna, calling the girl a black bitch. "Thanks, Daddy," JJ said bitterly into the phone. "No, I talked to your mother and told her that you needed that room for the baby," Jack objected. "Anything she said or did after that? That's on her conscience." Jack nearly caused another panic at St. Elizabeth Community Services when he arrived at the office Friday. Instead of his usual brown mid-length suit, he was wearing khakis and a button-down shirt. But when Jack walked out of the office at 5:10 the following Wednesday, wearing tight blue jeans, a blue shirt and loafers, and his suit slung over his shoulder, a slight seismic wave swept through the building. "And you're leaving 30 minutes early?" asked Rhonda. "Go, Jack! Go, Jack! Go, Jack!" chanted Garrett, one of the IT guys. At Tommy's restaurant, Jack ordered fried oysters and a Coke. After finishing his meal, he had to agree that hot ham and cheese with olive dressing was still his favorite dish. "But hey, you never know until you try it," he said aloud. Michelle was already waiting for him and smiled widely, running up to greet him. "This looks much more comfortable than that old fussy suit," she complimented, stroking his arm. "Hi, Bubbles, you look good too," he smiled. She laughed with delight at being called Bubbles. He was much more relaxed and was really enjoying the lesson. "Well, back to the kids," Michelle said, as Kizzy congratulated everyone on a great lesson. "I'm sure Barry is getting hungry by now." "Barry? Oh, yes, the little guy," Jack smiled. "How are the little ones doing?" "Millie has gotten to the point of asking why we can't live with Daddy most of the time. Mandy is starting to whine about it, too. But that's only because Millie whines about it, and as long as Barry has a dry diaper, he's happy," Michelle admitted. "See you next Wednesday, Bubbles," Jack smiled. "I'll make up a nickname for you," Michelle threatened. Yeah, I can't wait," Jack said. Percy was the next of his children to call Jack to complain about their mother. "Daddy, please do something," Percy whined. "She's been here for 2 days and Addison is already ready to kill her or me." "What am I, an enforcer?" asked Jack. And that was what Jacqueline had asked him when he'd called her to tell her to get out of Percy's 2-bedroom apartment. "My apartment only costs $4.25 a month. You can't tell me you can't afford $4.25 a month, can you?" asked her Jack. "I got fired from my job, Jack. It's hard to rent an apartment with no money," Jacqueline muttered. "Jacqueline, we sold the house," Jack reminded her. "We each got a check for $42,000. What happened to all that money?" She didn't answer his question, only begged him to reconsider his decision to reconcile. "Do you remember what you said to me when I asked you if you would like to go to the Catskills?" asked Jack. "On my last vacation? I said, hey, why don't we go to the Catskills? We really liked it there the last time we went. Do you remember what you said?" "No, you know I don't remember," she snapped back. "But I'm sure you do remember. You said, why bother?" "Well, Jacqueline, why bother? Reconcile? Why?" said Jack. Penelope let her mother know that as much as she loved her, there was simply no room for her in her apartment. "Besides, Mom, you hate dogs. And Samson and Delilah were here first," Penelope said, while her 2 Irish wolfhounds whined and begged for attention. Chapter 3. "So, Jack, where do you think you're going?" asked Jill as he strolled past her stall with his suit in hand. "I beg your pardon?" He laughed. "I don't ask you where you're going every time you walk out of here." "Yeah, but I don't smile like that every time I leave here either," she smiled. Jack knew that if he told Jill, even before the first cup of coffee was poured the next morning, every employee at St. Elizabeth's Community Services would know about it. They all knew he was divorcing Jacqueline, and they all knew why. Women would come up to him and call Jacqueline a bitch and tell Jack that not all women are like that. And to make matters worse, men were either silently patting him on the back or avoiding him altogether. "Okay, Jill, but you mustn't tell anyone," Jack said. "Oh, you know I won't tell," Jill promised. "Well, every Wednesday, after my divorce, how am I supposed to live on half, huh?" said Jack. "I know that, bitch," agreed Jill. "But anyway, I make a few extra bucks modeling in ULD art classes every Wednesday," whispered Jack. "You what?" asked Jill, looking at him in disbelief. "Yeah, the University of Louisiana at DeHardy?" asked Jack. "So, they have these art classes? $100 to get naked and just stand there. The first time I did that? God, how embarrassed I was. One girl said she was about to run out of red paint when she tried to knock my blush off, but after that..." Jack managed to run to his car before bursting into laughter. He was still chuckling when he walked into Kizzy's. "Okay, Jackhammer, what's so funny?" demanded Michelle, grabbing his arm. He blushed, but told her what he had told the notorious gossip girl at his workplace. Both he and Michelle laughed amicably, with her covering her mouth with a dainty hand. Well, I'd pay to draw you, she admitted when Kizzy called the class to attention. So, Jackhammer, are you ready? Teased Michelle. Yeah, that's what all the ladies call me, Jack said, and Michelle immediately blushed. That's not what I meant, she shrieked, slapping him on the arm. Problems, Kizzy smiled. Yeah, she hit me, Jack complained mockingly. You should have heard what he said, Michelle complained. I'll think of another nickname, Michelle promised as they danced. Whatever you say, Bubbles, Jack smiled and spun her around. That's it, Kizzy encouraged. Several other couples were also cheering them on, and Jack and Michelle smiled widely. You want to, Jack stammered when Kizzy announced the end of the class. Michelle smiled at him. Her smile didn't make him any less nervous, but he made up his mind. Why don't we grab a cup of coffee or something? He asked. I can't, Michelle said. Remember, I'm breastfeeding. Oh, hell, I didn't even think of that, Jack agreed. But what about the big old malt at Clark's? Michelle smiled, taking his hand in hers. Yeah, that sounds awesome, Jack agreed, smiling through his blush. We'll take your car, decided Michelle. But when she stepped outside and saw Jack driving the smart car, she nudged him toward her minivan. I'm not getting in one of those, she declared. It's like trying to fit a basketball into a golf ball. Come on, they're much bigger than they look, Jack protested, but still got into her minivan. She sent her parents a text message, letting them know she was staying at Clark's. Yes, it's a date, she replied to her mother's question. And no sooner had they driven less than 2 miles from Kizzy's dance school to Clark's drive-in than Michelle's cell phone buzzed no less than 8 times. Do you want to answer it? Asked Jack. God, no, it's my family trying to drive me crazy, she said, glancing at the display. Michelle still took the large chocolate malt, while Jack chose the vanilla cone with dip. So, Jack Rabbit, why did you decide to take up dancing? Asked Michelle, watching the waitress scurry away. Jack Rabbit, huh? Jack smiled. Yeah, that's what my girlfriends call me. Geez, never mind, laughed Michelle as her phone buzzed again. And stop looking at all those girls in shorts, she demanded. Oh, I was just thinking how good you look in them, Jack muttered, before his brain could tell him to shut up. And before she could respond, a police cruiser pulled into the doorway beside them. Damn right, yelled Michelle as her older brother stepped out of the police car. Are you having trouble with your phone? Asked Officer Richard Voisin to his little sister. No, I'm ignoring it, just like I'm ignoring you, she snapped back. Uh-huh, Richard smirked. Hi, began Jack speaking. Jonathan Archibald Hebert, Sr., said Richard. I checked the tags on your car. Really? Shouted Michelle. I can't even buy my own malt? Richard playfully pinched his sister's nose. After what Brian did to you, huh? Said Richard. Well, not without us checking him out, yeah. He nodded to Jack. Don't worry about not answering the phone, he said as he prepared to circle his car. I've already let everyone know Jack's okay. I hate you, she shouted at him. Yeah, I love you too, Richard said as he opened his door. We'll have to bring him over on Sunday. Jack chuckled, and a moment later Michelle laughed as well. I'm so sorry about this, she said. Gosh, what an awkward first date, huh? Really? I think it's a great first date, Jack said. And that's exactly what I'm going to call you. She shrieked shrilly, taking a big gulp of malt. Archibald, huh? Oh. Oh, God, don't, he protested. Oh, but it's Ovsy, isn't it? She teased. Her phone buzzed a few more times, but she ignored it while they ate ice cream. When she pulled up next to his car, the only one in the parking lot of Kizzy's dance school, they continued to talk quietly. Michelle could see that Jack was getting more and more nervous. Achi, are you trying to kiss me? She finally asked. Yes, he admitted. She tugged at his shirt and kissed him. Give me your phone number. You're coming over for Sunday dinner whether you want to or not, she said when they parted. 31 messages? She asked, glancing at her cell phone display again. Really? After another long kiss, Jack got out of her car and opened his car door. He smiled, waved, and drove off, leaving her to answer the 31 messages. Chapter 4. Jack walked into the building and Whitney, a pretty girl with a blank head who sat at the front desk in the lobby, blushed as she greeted him. On the third floor, some women blushed. Others avoided looking him in the eye. And a few men giggled. Garrett smiled and gave him a thumbs up. And then Jack remembered what he had told Jill the previous evening and couldn't keep from laughing out loud. "You're not going to tell anyone, are you?" he asked Jill when he saw her in the break room. "Oh, but I didn't," she denied, painting a mask of guilt on her face. He looked normal that Sunday, especially considering he was wearing a Saints pullover shirt and khakis. And see? He knows how to tuck his shirt into his pants. Michelle's father, Barry Voisin, told Michelle's older brother. "Mr. Avci, are we going swimming at your house again?" asked Amelia, Millie Melançon. "I'm sorry, honey, but I don't live in this house anymore," said Jack. Just then he remembered that his apartment complex had a swimming pool. Quite often he would come home from work and see various beautiful and not-so-beautiful bodies in and around the pool. "But my apartment has a pool," he said. "So can we swim in your apartment?" asked Mandy. "I don't mind," agreed Jack. "Do you really want to see that body in a swimsuit?" whispered Michelle. Whispered Michelle. Whispered Michelle. "Good God, yes," Jack said firmly. "You're so bad," she laughed loudly. He checked himself, especially when he told Barry and Richard that he usually went to Red's sports bar to watch the Saints game. "Oh man, they had the hottest wings, yeah. I swear you couldn't feel your tongue after them. Do they still have wings like that?" asked Barry. "Yeah," replied both Jack and Richard. If anyone thought it a little odd that Michelle's beau was 20 years older than her, no one said anything. Jack and Barry reached for the last biscuit to munch on the last bit of rice and gravy and stewed steak. Marie Voisin tapped the spoon on Barry's knuckles. "Yes, he's our guest. Give him that biscuit," she ordered her husband. "But I need that biscuit," Barry whined, patting himself on his voluminous belly. "Look, I'm going to melt soon, yeah." "Well, I wouldn't want that to happen," Jack said. "Go ahead and get you the last one." No, you look hungrier than I am," Barry smiled broadly. "Okay, I'll see you Wednesday," Jack said, as he said goodbye to Michelle's 6 siblings, Millie and Mandy, as well as her mom and dad. "Do I have to wait that long?" asked Michelle. "Well, no, we can go to side by side and then foxtrots. We've practiced enough already, haven't we?" said Jack. "Oh, side by side?" asked Marie. "Shit, Barry, why don't you take me to side by side, eh?" "Because I'm cheap, yeah," said Barry. "We're taking my van, yeah. I'm not getting in that little thing you call a car," Michelle said, wrinkling her nose at his smart car. "What are you talking about? About this?" "It's a Mercedes-Benz, yes," Jack said. "It's not a Mercedes-Benz," smirked Michelle. "Yes, it is, made by Mercedes-Benz," said Jack. They hugged and kissed for as long as they felt comfortable with her whole family watching, and then Jack promised he'd be there at 6:30 the next night. Jack was amazed at how easily he reverted to the dialect of his youth. His mother's parents spoke very little English, mostly Cajun French. His father's parents spoke heavily accented English and switched to their Cajun French when they were upset or agitated. Many conversations at the dinner table were a mixture of English and Cajun French. When Henry Jonathan Hebert and Eliza Cynthia Arnaud Hebert wanted to keep something from their children's ears, they spoke to each other in Cajun French. They had no idea that all 3 of their boys understood Cajun French. Through high school and college, Jack gradually lost that accent. Working as an administrator at St. Elizabeth Community Services, he tried to pronounce words clearly, without a Cajun accent. But after lunch at his desk, Voisin brought him back to his heritage. He logged onto the internet, found the phone number for Side by Side Steakhouse, and left a message asking for a reservation for 2 for the following evening at 6:45. Not even a call from his ex-wife spoiled his good mood. "Hey, Jack, it's me," she purred. "See?" he replied, trying not to switch to a Cajun accent. Jacqueline mocked that accent when she was out of sight of his parents. She also mocked their cuisine, calling it unhealthy. Despite what you all believe, fat is not food, she sneered. So Jack was careful not to give Jacqueline any reason to shoot at him. So, how's it going? She asked. You know what? Yeah, good, Jack said, then grumbled. Well, I finally did it. I broke down and bought myself a little apartment, said Jacqueline. That's good to hear, Jack agreed. So I was wondering if you might want to come over, cooed Jacqueline, putting on a false charm. What? Why? Asked Jack. Well, you know, to see the place, I'll make the stuffed bell peppers that used to be your favorite, remember? Said Jacqueline. Jacqueline, I don't think so, said Jack. And just like that, Jacqueline's false cheerfulness was swept away. She became whiny, self-pitying. She threw in that none of their children wanted to talk to her anymore. I mean, Deirdre, my baby girl, abandoned me, can you imagine? She sobbed. Well, I'm busy tomorrow, Jack resigned himself. How about Wednesday? Suggested Jacqueline quickly, her tears drying as quickly as they had started. No, I have plans for Wednesday too, Jack said. What to do? Asked Jacqueline. Jack briefly told her the same thing he had told Jill. Taking a course at school, picking up some knowledge, he said. It wasn't a complete lie. For years he'd taken courses at the University of Louisiana at DeGard, and he had tightened up his skills. He just didn't feel like telling her that he was improving his dancing skills. How about Tuesday then? She suggested. Yeah, okay, he said. At 10:30 on Monday morning, a girl named Lassie called his cell phone and confirmed that he had a reservation for 2 at Side by Side Restaurant for 6:40 that evening. We look forward to seeing you, Mr. Hebert, the girl said pleasantly. Not as much as I am, Jack joked, and Lacey giggled. Michelle giggled too when Jack called her to remind her that they had a date tonight. Like I'm thinking about anything else? She asked. With the words, love you, Michelle disconnected the call. Jacqueline hadn't said love you until they'd known each other for almost a year, and that was in response to his own declaration of love. And Jacqueline didn't call him any affectionate words. The only time she called him honey or baby was when she needed something. Again, at 6:30, Jack had to greet Michelle's entire family, mother and father, brothers and sisters, nephews and nieces. She only had one nephew named Richie. Mealy, Mandy, and Barry, who gave him a toothless grin. Michelle was wearing a dress that was just a little too small for her. It was obviously her best dress, and it had obviously been bought for her quite some time ago. Jack guessed that the dress had been bought before Amelia was pregnant. Damn, Bubbles, I need to go home and get dressed up, Jack said, even though he was wearing a nice black pinstripe suit, white shirt, and blood-red tie. What, you look good? She asked. Yeah, but not as good as you, no, he said, and she blushed with pride. Why don't you say anything like that, huh? Asked Marie to Barry. Because then I would say it all the time, yes, said Barry, and kissed his wife. Oh, you're lying, she laughed and kissed him. I'll give you all a police escort, Richard joked. If you do, I'll kill you, Michelle threatened. Ah, yes, Mr. Hebert, the restaurant hostess greeted them. This way. Michelle looked around the posh restaurant in awe. The best place Brian had ever taken her to was Casa Ol Mexican Restaurant. There were no prices on the menu, and she wondered about that little fact. Honey, this is so you don't have to worry about what you order, Jack said quietly. He took her small hand in his. You'll get whatever you want, he said. Whenever we're together, you'll get everything you want, you hear? Looking into his brown eyes, Michelle felt her insides turn to liquid. I love you. Yes, she whispered. Then her big brown eyes got even bigger, and her mouth opened in a soundless sigh. I mean, she tried to correct herself. Oh, I'm so happy to hear you say that because I love you, Jack smiled. Really? Gasped Michelle. The ribeye was cooked perfectly. The outside was cooked through, preserving the natural juices of the thick piece of meat, and the inside was a light pink. Michelle tried to finish it, but was only able to eat half of it. Jack managed to eat the whole bone, but both agreed that dessert would have to wait. Chapter 5. What a difference a day makes, huh? Asked Jill as Jack came out of the office dressed in his usual Wednesday jeans and shirt. Huh? Asked Jack. Well, yesterday you walked out of here like your dog was dead, Jill remarked. And today, you've got a Wednesday night smile on your face. Jack smiled wider and headed for the elevator. Last night he had gone to his ex-wife's new apartment. Jacqueline had rented a 2-bedroom apartment. It was about 200 square feet larger than Jack's. The complex wasn't bad. There were no disabled cars in the parking lot. The grounds were clean. The interior was clean, simple, with white walls and beige carpet. The stuffed peppers were fine. Jacqueline had prepared a broccoli casserole for the peppers, cooked in the oven. The Voisin household bowed their heads in prayer before the feeding began. From Sunday lunch, Jack began praying, blessing the food. I'm not poisoning you, you don't have to pray, Jacqueline chided as he bowed his head. During dinner, Jacqueline complained. She complained about the high rent, the expensive furniture, the boring court work, the noisy neighbors. Again, she talked about reconciliation. Did you hear me? Asked Jacqueline, trying not to give away her irritation. Jack finished her casserole, took a sip of cloudy iced tea, and turned to face her. What made you want to cheat on me? He asked bluntly. What? What does that have to do with? Hissed Jacqueline. It has everything to do with that, said Jack. He put the napkin down on the table. Jacqueline, for some reason you decided to go and entertain Brian Melançon. I told you not to do it. I told you I didn't agree with it. I told you it would cost you our marriage, but you went anyway. The only reason you didn't? I kind of screwed it up, didn't I? I really didn't think, Jacqueline admitted weakly. I know you really didn't think I'd fight back so hard. Really didn't think I'd leave or divorce you. Really didn't think you wouldn't get your way like you always do, Jack sighed. You see? Exclaimed Jacqueline shrilly. You're as much to blame as I am. You're always… Jacqueline, I never heard you apologize, he said, and rose to his feet. You're not done yet. You still have… protested Jacqueline. Oh yes, I'm done, Jack said and headed for her door. Don't call me again, huh? We have nothing to say. He walked into Clark's and got a chili cheeseburger and a vanilla malt. I'd be afraid to drive in that thing, the waitress admitted, looking at his little car. Yeah, but I get 42 miles per gallon, Jack agreed happily. After reaching his apartment, he and Michelle sent each other text message after text message until it was 10 o'clock at night. Good night, Avci, she sent along with a kiss. Love you, good night, he sent. Love you even more, she replied. I know, he replied. He laughed when she replied with an emoji of her tongue sticking out. It was now Wednesday, and Jack was looking forward to dancing with his bubbles. Whitney wished him a good evening, though a blush appeared on her smooth face. A hot po' boy with ham and cheese, with olive dressing and a few drops of hot sauce, and Jack was fed up and ready. Achi! Exclaimed Michelle and rushed over to greet him. Hello, Bubbles, he smiled as he appraised her outfit. You look good, yeah. They danced, Kizzy calling out the moves, correcting those who needed corrections, and praising those who didn't. When she announced the end of class, Jack leaned over and kissed Michelle's lips softly. It's Brian's weekend with the kids, Michelle said tokenistically. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about wanting to make love to you, Jack purred. She stood up on her toes and kissed him. Okay, that sounds good, she agreed. On Thursday, Jack talked to Barry, Michelle's father, man to man. He found out that Michelle's wedding had been rushed. There was no honeymoon. So Jack planned a romantic weekend getaway. And on Friday, he left work at noon. Jack couldn't help but laugh. Jacqueline's Mercedes-Benz was parked in the Superior parking lot. They called them used, but even the salesman had to agree they were used cars. You know what? Yeah, give me that one, Jack agreed, and bought Jacqueline's car. Then he went to his tiny apartment and packed his suitcase. His good mood soured slightly when he pulled up in front of the Voisin house and saw Brian Melanson struggling with Barry and Mandy's car seat. Millie was already sitting in the front seat of the car, wearing her seatbelt. Just then a thought struck Jack. "Let me do it," he said, taking Barry from Brian. "And you take Mandy." "Hi, Mr. Avsi," Millie greeted him. "You're not going to hit me, are you?" asked Brian fearfully. "Eh? No, go ahead and take her," said Jack, quickly attaching Barry's car seat clip to the seat bar. He then walked over to Millie, kissed her forehead, and kissed Mandy too. "Do you have a minute? Need to talk to you," Jack turned to Brian. "Are you doing anything? How about Monday night?" "Monday night? No, I'm not doing anything," Brian agreed. Jack then helped Michelle with her suitcase. The trip took 2 hours, 2 hours during which all they did was talk, get to know each other. Michelle told him that Brian was a friend of Richard's and had always been so kind to her. "I mean, I know I'm fat, but he always says hi to me and tells me I'm beautiful," Michelle said. "Hi, you're beautiful," Jack said. "And because I'm allergic to latex," said Michelle. "I bet I know what you're trying to say," said Jack. He puckered his lips slightly. He'd bought a 12-pack of condoms. But if Michelle was allergic to latex, they would either have to give up or take their chances. Jack hoped they would take the risk. Michelle hoped they'd take risks too. Traffic in Baton Rouge was a regular nightmare, and Jack breathed a sigh of relief when they were finally in Gonzales. Bourbon Street was a real eye-opener for a girl who had never traveled outside of Degar, Louisiana. Café du Monde was a delight. Jack had agreed that they would eat there every day. But as night enveloped the city in velvet warmth, Michelle took Jack's hand and looked at him with her big brown eyes. "Let's go back to the room," she suggested. Chapter 6. She chattered nonstop on the walk to the hotel, chattered nonstop in the rickety old elevator, and chattered nonstop while he fiddled with the keycard. "Bubbles, are you nervous?" asked Jack quietly. "No," Michelle denied, and then nodded her head, resting her head against his chest. "I'm all fat," she admitted. "And you're all pretty too," Jack said. He didn't deny that she was fat. She was about 40 to 50 pounds overweight, and she knew it. Any attempt on his part to deny that she was overweight would have looked disingenuous and dishonest. So Jack told Michelle the truth. She was beautiful. It didn't matter if she was fat or not. She was beautiful. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched him turn off the 2 lamps in the room. Then they got down to it. Chapter 7. Brian looked nervous, anxious. Jack ordered a cup of coffee, asked the girl behind the counter to add evaporated milk, then walked over to the table. "Hey, Brian, how's it going?" asked Jack, nodding in greeting as he lowered himself onto the bench across from Brian. Good, I'm fine, how are you?" Brian stuttered. Yeah, good, I've got black bean soup simmering in the pot, waiting for me to get home," Jack said, and sipped his coffee. "So what do you want to talk to me about?" Brian broached the subject. "Why does my wife want to cheat on me?" Jack babbled, deciding to get straight to the point. "Huh?" asked Brian. He was running through several scenarios in his head. But Jack's direct question wasn't part of any of the imagined scenarios. Jack swallowed the scalding hot coffee and set the cup aside. "Everything she asked for, I got her. That huge monster house? God, how I hated that place. But Jacqueline just had to have it. Her car? She had a great Lincoln, but she just had to have her Mercedes-Benz," Jack said. He looked at Brian. "I'm just trying to figure myself out," he admitted. "Give her whatever she wants, never cheat on her, don't hit her, don't gamble. And then she just gets up and says she's going to have a little affair, and I'm trying to figure out why." "She was getting older," Brian said. "What, me too? We're all getting older," Jack muttered. Brian held up his hand. "You said you wanted to know why, but I can't tell you if you're too busy running your mouth," Brian said. They looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Jack nodded his head in agreement. "She's getting a little older," Brian continued. "And her youngest isn't home anymore, Dee or Debbie or something." Deirdre, Jack agreed. And she feels old, unwanted, Brian continued. He smiled and shrugged. All it took was, wow, you look good today. And you really do have a daughter old enough to go to college. And Jacqueline smiled and laughed, Brian admitted. Heck, I kept telling her she looked good, Jack grumbled angrily. Yeah, but from you? That doesn't count, Brian said. You're the husband. But that doesn't mean you can get away with not telling her that. It just doesn't count. Brian drained his cup of coffee and looked at the counter. Come on, Jack said. Bring another one. Brian did so and returned. Anyway, she's smiling at me, flirting with me a little. She's flattered that a man much younger than her is showing her attention, Brian piped up. Meh! He blew on his cup and then twitched when his lips made contact with the hot mug. Hot, Jack agreed, sipping his coffee. That's how I screwed Cindy, the school secretary, Stacy, the chemistry teacher, and the one Michelle caught me with, Brian said. Both men sat for a long time. All it takes is a little attention, and then they start telling you about their husband. He doesn't pay them any attention. He doesn't take them out to eat. He'd rather sit on his ass and watch TV, Brian said. He took a sip of his coffee and wrinkled slightly from the heat. You just bought yourself this smart car, Brian remembered. And as soon as I asked her if you were lamenting the Saints' losing season so far, she started telling me all your faults. Brian shrugged. Huh? Did he buy himself a new car? And it's impractical? What a selfish bastard, Brian suggested. Huh? He doesn't take you to the dance? Does he prefer to watch football? I bet he doesn't get on well with you in the bedroom either, does he? Whatever. Monday through Sunday, I bust my ass for her, Jack snorted. Most husbands do, Brian admitted, but all I have to do is hint that it's not enough. Jack emptied his mug, though the coffee had already managed to become bitter in his stomach. And Michelle has a crush on you? He asked, more to himself than to Brian. And her? Always a fat little thing, and all you had to do was tell her she was cute, Brian scoffed. Worst piece of... He faltered, remembering seeing Jack outside Michelle's house the previous Friday. So when the serpent left the Garden of Eden, he became an English teacher, Jack thought as he rose to his feet. He had to smile, however. Brian Melanchthon was a skilled seducer. But Michelle had told Jack that Brian Melanchthon had little skill as a lover. Jack gave a strained smile, said goodnight to Brian, and left the Jitters coffee shop. Jack reached his little apartment, munched on some black bean soup, and then added some more hot sauce to it. And he and Michelle sent each other message after message. Tuesday morning, Jack not only woke up smiling, he'd been waking up with a smile on his face for a long time, but he didn't feel like a failure, a loser. He had long been plagued by those pesky questions. Why did Jacqueline want to cheat? Was this really her first time cheating? Why did he fail in his role as husband, breadwinner? But now it was much clearer to him that he had not failed. He may have been distracted, so to speak, but it wasn't his failure. He also realized that he had outgrown the bachelor apartment he was renting. Epilogue. Today was the 12th class. Jack signed them up for 12 more classes and paid for lessons for both himself and Michelle, though Barry, Michelle's father, offered to pitch in a little. What? Why? It's not like you're dancing with her. Jack smiled as Millie held onto one hand and Mandy held onto the other. Now tell me again why we have to go to McDonald's? Because, Mr. Avshi, they have hamburgers and fries, and you can get a malt, and then go and play on the slide they have there. Millie patiently explained why they had to go to McDonald's to eat dinner. They also got a prize in the box, Mandy agreed. Now, as Jack and Michelle spun around on the dance floor, dancing together with fluidity and beauty of movement, Jack smiled at Michelle. She smiled back at him, her face flushed with happiness. It's hard to believe that 12 weeks ago, you couldn't tell the difference between your left hand and your right hand, Kizzy praised. The music began to fade and Jack released Michelle from his arms. Then, as Michelle spun in the opposite direction, he dropped to one knee. Michelle looked at him confusedly. The other couple stopped and looked at Jack and Michelle, who stood in the center of the large hall. Michelle Voisin, I love you with all my heart, Jack said loudly and firmly. Will you marry me? He held out a beautiful yellow gold ring with a 1-carat diamond surrounded by 4 smaller diamonds. Michelle gawked at the ring, then grabbed Jack and plowed him to the floor, lying on top of him and kissing him frantically. Oh, Achi, she exclaimed and laughed. The other couples applauded, laughing as Jack struggled to get to his feet. I take it that's a yes? Kizzy laughed as Michelle finally got off Jack. And you're all going to my wedding, you hear? Ordered Michelle, looking at her ring. Really, Daddy? Teased JJ as Jack called to tell him the good news. My stepmother is younger than me? Deirdre pretended to be upset that she would no longer be the baby of the family. Millie assured Deirdre that she would enjoy being a big sister. It's great, she explained. I'll be able to go to bed a whole 15 minutes more because I'm a big sister. So I can stay up another 15 minutes longer than you? Asked Deirdre, amused. Yes, Millie assured her. Daddy, why do they keep calling you Mr. Avti? Asked Percy as they all walked around Jack's new house. JJ, Shauna holding her son Trey, Percy and his wife Addison, whose 8-month pregnant belly looked ready to pop out, Penelope and her partner Elisa, and Deirdre turned to hear the explanation. When I first saw Michelle, I called her Bubbles, Jack said. Bubbles? Asked Elisa, and the Cupid doll's face crinkled in a smile. I don't know. She was just so fidgety and pot-bellied, so it just came out, Jack admitted. And then I found out his middle name is Archibald, Michelle said, taking his hand in hers. And he's a big Saints fan. Penelope nodded her head understandingly. Archie Manning is still the Saints' greatest quarterback. JJ, Percy, and Penelope repeated what they had heard all their lives. As Millie and Mandy showed their new older siblings the pegs marking the spot where the pool would be dug, Deirdre squatted next to her father. Sorry, Daddy. I let it slip a little that you and Michelle are getting married next Saturday, Deirdre confessed. Honey, so what? I'm not keeping it a secret from your mother, Jack shrugged. He smiled when Millie promised Shauna that she would teach Trey how to swim. Well, she's a little pissed, Deirdre said. Her own damn fault, Jack said. It's her own damn fault. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.